All right, howdy, howdy, howdy. Welcome. If you're new to the channel, my name is Elliott, and this is Rickety Ski Reviews. Today, we're gonna talk about skis. In my last video, I talked about the Nordica Enforcer, and you know, that ski always strikes a nerve with people. It just doesn't suit my ski style. If you like it, that's awesome. I'm not trying to like yuck anyone's yum, but what I'm really trying to do is say, hey, before you buy this ski has some real shortcomings. But just because I don't like a ski doesn't mean I don't think anyone else should enjoy it. That's insane. So today, we're gonna talk about skis I really do hate. Because the Nordic Enforcer was just kind of disappointing in that it didn't like stack up to current skis, but boy, over the last 30 years of me skiing, there have been some real stinkers. So let's talk about it. So today, let's talk about the 10 worst skis. Now I say 10 worst skis, there's actually one snowboard sprinkled in there, but really this isn't a list of like the worst skis. I was doing some research on this, and there are skis that were just like dangerous failures. You know, like Lang made a ski for a while that's ranked as one of the worst skis of all time. That's not what this list is. This is a list of the 10 skis or snowboards that I've personally had or skied on that I just personally hated. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to take a step way back and look at old skis. And there have been a lot of failures over history, but also just skis that were overhyped or were just a pain in the butt for one reason or another. So let's get this started. This is just my list of what I consider skiing failures, a design that was a total failure and ended up just being a pain to own. So a lot of these, based on my history, are race skis, just because that's what I owned as a kid. I didn't have multiple pairs of skis usually. I just had my race skis, so you know, you're gonna hear about race skis. That's okay. I do think that race skis are worth talking about because a lot of the technology that gets kind of forerun with race skis often finds its way into everyday carving skis. So number 10 on the list is literally any mini ski. If you guys had mini skis, you know what I'm talking about. These things were so sketchy, so dangerous. It was like trying to ski on ice skates almost. They were these little miniature skis that a bunch of ski manufacturers made. And actually, when I was in the Berkman Academy junior ski program, they required the racers to have these because we were supposed to be doing some kind of slalom drill with them. They were awful. They didn't turn smoothly. They were way too short. They were really sketchy. The bindings were literally like I clip in and clamp. There wasn't much to the binding. We would go so fast on these because of the way that some of the runs were designed. The only thing I ever really liked about them is one time as a kid I had to hike up somewhere and ski it. And I thought that that was really nice. You know, I put them on my backpack. They weighed almost nothing. It wasn't fun to ski down on, but I enjoyed the lightweight of them. Yeah, if you know what I'm talking about, mini skis was kind of this craze for a while when people were just trying to find anything as an alternative to traditional skis, and mini skis stunk. There's a reason you don't really see them around anymore. Also, on the mini skis, you had to have like the little leashes because they would get away from you. They didn't have any brakes. I mean, these things were like really kind of cheaply thrown together and a total nightmare. I wouldn't be surprised if you're not even allowed to take them on certain ski resorts anymore. So that's kind of an easy number 10. Number 9 on the list, and this ski barely makes the list to be honest, but it's the Head World Cup TI Slalom Ski from 2002. If you remember what they look like, they had the bright yellow tips that were just completely obnoxious for the slalom ski. But I had a pair of these skis, and it could have been that I wasn't a very good skier when I was that age, or a good ski racer, I guess. But man, I had such a hard time turning these skis. These slalom skis were so heavy and dense that they felt almost like GS skis with the turn radius. They were really, really unpleasant. They were one of the skis I had the year I quit ski racing just because they didn't match my ski style at the time. I was a pretty small kid. They were just brutal. Now, that being said, I can understand that. I was such a small kid that maybe these skis were meant for a heavier person or for a stronger person. So take that for what you will. That's why it's kind of on the bottom of the list, but that was a ski that I hated, and every time I see it at a ski swap, I just kind of, you know, under my breath mutter. Also, like, I was reading through some of the comments on the Head World Cup T1 Slalom Ski, and it apparently had like a ton of layers to it that made it extra bulky and extra hard to kind of load up. I don't know, it's very old information. Again, that was 21 years ago, but I have so much disdain when I see that design. It was ugly, and I didn't enjoy skiing on it. The next ski I had coming in at number 8 was the Dynastar Troublemaker from somewhere around 2007, 2008. This was Dynastar's introduction to twin tip skis. If I remember right, this was one of the kind of the early twin tip skis, and man, not only did these things delaminate like crazy, the edges were like falling off of the side. I wasn't even hitting rails on them, just basic boxes. These things were a total nightmare. Granted, I got them secondhand from someone else, so maybe that was some abuse from them. But even then, the things that I saw happen after I owned them with delaminating, I'm very light on my skis, very easy on my skis. I take good care of them, put them away, and these skis just fell apart. They also were very heavy for the time. I guess now everything's so light that it's hard to gauge, but I remember them being really heavy. I actually took these up to Tuckerman's Ravine, hiked up with them, you know, so like I took them into the backcountry, and there in the springtime, the snow is pretty soft. And even then, they really struggled because the edges just, I don't know, they weren't sharp, they didn't hold an edge well, they chattered a lot. I mean, people talk about chatter, those skis really chattered. I do understand that they kind of have a legacy for being one of the early twin tips, and they had kind of moved the needle as far as freestyle skis go, so respect there. But for me, owning them personally, they were a rough ski, and they really didn't have kind of the quality that they should have, at least in my opinion. No hatred toward freestyle skiing. I understand that I'm kind of a guest in that domain, but I was not impressed with these Dynastar troublemakers. They weren't for me, and they caused me nothing but headache as far as delamination and falling apart. They also rusted like crazy. I don't know, maybe I got a bad pair, but I had a really hard time with those skis back then. You know, that's why they're kind of not at the top of the list, but the troublemakers caused me a lot of trouble. All right, coming in at number 7. Again, this is a lot of race skis, but that's what I knew back then. I've kind of seen the failures of a lot of race skis. A lot of this technology either got baked in and other people hated it, or it never got adopted because it was such a failure on the race front. So that's why a lot of these failures you saw, because they kind of foreran it with the race ski and then never made it to mass market. Number 7 is the Atomic Race 5 GS skis from 2005. Now, this wasn't necessarily a terrible ski to ski on. Like, that's why it's in number 7, but the GS ski was particularly troublesome. The Atomic GS ski was so stiff, it's like a very, very Austrian ski. I mean, if you ever watch those World Cup skiers, their thighs are the size of my abdomen, you know, they're really strong skiers. And as a kid, those skis were so stiff. They were impossible to turn. They had these bindings that only went on Atomic skis. This was before you could kind of cross over bindings like you can now. These Atomic bindings had these little hooks, and the only way that you could put the brakes up, rather than a rubber band like every other brake, when you wanted to wax or tune your skis, the only way to put it up was a metal clip that got inserted and had to be held up. And as somebody who worked in a ski shop, these clips did not hold the brakes up all the way. You would go to put these skis in the sand grinder, right, to like kind of grind out the bases, and you would just smell melting plastic from these bindings because the brakes didn't go up all the way, so you were constantly just shaving off little pieces of plastic. What a terrible design on the brakes alone. Not to mention that ski was stiff, especially in the GS ski, and it had this golf ball top technology that was supposed to make the skis more aerodynamic. What a bunch of baloney. These are the ones that Bodie Miller skied on. These did not do anything great. In fact, that golf top sheet started to delaminate really quickly on a lot of the skis that I saw and a lot of my friends' skis. I don't know, these skis were pretty bogus. They weren't like the worst thing to ski on. They definitely were stable, but that brake design was awful. The golf ball design was gimmicky. One of the skis that caused me the most trouble that I'd seen over the years. I had a friend who got sent 2 or 3 different pairs from Atomic because they broke inside of the warranty period. And then eventually they would keep breaking, but he was outside of warranty, so he just had to move on to something else. The next ski I'm going to talk about, number 6 for a ski failure, was the Volkl P60 Slalom Ski. Now, this ski again isn't on the top of the list because the ski itself skied well. It was a responsive slalom ski, it was light, it was a really good ski for people who were lighter like me back then and weren't really aggressive over, you know, kind of overloading the ski. But this Volkl P60 had a major design flaw, and that was that the tips were really brittle. Whatever the rubber was that they used for tip guards, because in slalom, when you cross block, something you might not realize is it bounces off of your shin guard, but then a lot of times it'll bounce off of the tips of your skis, and that'll cause them to shatter, delaminate. This ski, whatever the rubber was that they used for the tips, it would constantly break off. I'm talking once a week, once every 2 weeks, they would just snap off and go flying. And then what would happen is you couldn't get a replacement quick enough, the shops didn't keep them, so you'd have to order from from Volkl, but you're still gonna be training. And then you just break off the tips, they would delaminate, they would literally shatter. They used to call these fairy slippers because they were just made out of glass. They would shatter and break so easily. So while the Volkl P60 was a nice ski, and it was kind of the precursor to what we know as the Volkl Race Tiger, which is one of the most famous race slalom skis ever built, the Volkl P60 was really onto something with design, but man, they just made this one little rubber tip so cheaply that it destroyed skis for everyone. In fact, that's almost why you hardly ever see used versions of these skis, because they shattered. They're gone. If you actually used them in a race course, they would break so easily. So that's why it goes in. It's not a bad ski, so it's kind of why it's at number 6, but this one design was such a fatal flaw that you had lots of people either returning them to Volkl or throwing them in the dumpster. Now, number 5 coming in for bad designs actually goes to a snowboard. This was a snowboard that I owned. I snowboarded for about 4 years total. I did it like every day, so I was super into it. I even did a couple of races on snowboarding where I like won the New England Championship or something. I don't remember. It was like the Mountain Dew Vertical Challenge maybe, which isn't like a real race, but it was fun. I was into it. I was carving on the snowboard. I had a Burton snowboard to learn, just kind of a basic one. I don't remember what it was called. And then I had a Burton Indy. Now that was a nice snowboard. That was one of my favorite snowboards. But in number 5 for worst designs on like a ski or snowboard, I don't know. I needed to hit 10, sprinkled a snowboard in, so sue me. But the one that I hated that was given to me by someone was the Elan Nale. Nale was spelled N-A-L-E, so it's just Elan spelled backwards. You know, it makes a palindrome. Whatever. This snowboard stunk, especially compared to the Burton, which was really soft and kind of could carve through. The Elan Nale was really rigid. It would kind of like bend, and then it kind of almost felt like it was gonna break. It was really brittle. It wasn't smooth for carving. It wasn't fun for jumps. It didn't kind of have that flicker to it. Again, I know I'm not using really technical snowboard terms because I just did it as a teenager a little bit, but man, Elan Nale was my least favorite snowboard. I always dreaded when my Burton board was getting worked on and I had to use this free Elan that someone had given me. I was given this board and I think I used it twice. It was awful. I, just brought it to the ski swap the next year and sold it for cheap just so someone else could have something. Elan Nale, pretty disappointing. I unfortunately have terrible luck with Elan. I've hardly ever been on anything Elan's made that I really like. Hoping that changes this year, but my introduction with the Elan snowboard, not impressive. Now, this next one is a little tricky. I had to go kind of into the archives to figure out what this ski was, because I demoed it in 2016. It was an Elan ski, so there's a chance that I'm getting the model wrong, okay? So take this with a very large grain of salt, but it was an Elan slalom-based ski that I skied on in 2016. My number 4 least favorite ski was the Elan Amphibio 14 from 2016. Now take this with a tremendous grain of salt, or put an asterisk on it. That one, I'm pretty sure that was the ski based on pictures, right? It's the same color and everything in the same year. And there's only one ski that color, so I'm fairly certain it was the Elan Amphibio. But I also think that the ski may have been tuned wrong. I think they may have like put the file on backwards and detuned it rather than tuning it, or they forgot to detune the tips and tails, because this ski just would like kind of flop into its turn. It couldn't hold its edge. The pressure and buildup was so unnatural. It felt borderline dangerous. Now, I think that whoever prepared this ski when I did this demo day may have messed up on it, because other people that skied it said the same thing as me. It was the worst skiing experience I've ever had, and it's a fairly modern ski. This ski was overly reactive in the tips, but then like wouldn't hold the edge through the rest of the turn. If you've ever danced but you're kind of offbeat, that's how it felt carving it. That was the Elan Amphibio 14. Again, it's 2016. That was a long time ago. I'm trying to remember the ski. The review I wrote up is gone now. But I do know that I gave it a 0.5 out of 5. So the lowest score I'd given any ski, and was very unimpressed with it. I'm hoping that, either the ski was tuned wrong, or maybe I'm just misremembering. So if you love the ski, relax. Whatever that Elan ski was, and I'm pretty sure it was the Amphibio, was one of the worst skis I've ever skied on. It was more frustrating in that like nothing about it felt like it was done lazily. It just felt like the timing of everything was off. The carving didn't feel right. The edges weren't tuned right. Like the angles, everything felt off. It's like when you go to take a sip of water and it's stale soda instead. It's that same terrible feeling that I had on these skis. Now, number 3 on the list comes from the 2010 Bomber Slalom Skis. This was Bomber's first attempt at skis, so you gotta give them a little bit of slack for that. And their GS skis felt okay. My brother was sponsored by them, and he and I both tried them at Mount Hood, and I hated them. I was like, no thank you, I don't want anything to do with the ski. The slalom ski specifically felt like you were going to a boat race and you had a big old pontoon boat. It was just so heavy, so beefy, so hard to turn in slalom, which is, you know, if you know slalom, it's like the smallest radius turns you have. These Bomber Slalom skis stunk. I didn't like them, and they were really brutal to ski on. Now, they may have changed since then. I know now they've kind of become a luxury brand, which has also put a bad taste in my mouth because now they're selling these skis for way, way too much money, past like the Stokely level, and they really don't have the pedigree that Stokely has. Anyway, that's a whole nother conversation for another day, but these Bomber skis were just so brutal. It was the worst slalom ski I've ever skied on, and if you want to see, I have a whole like long video on the history of Bomber and just kind of how they've changed over the years. You can see that. I'll link that down below. Cutting it a little bit of slack because they were trying to do something new, but it really was like they just designed a GS ski, and they designed that one fairly well. I mean, the GS ski definitely doesn't make the list of worst skis I've ever skied on, but it was like they didn't redesign specifically for the slalom ski, and it was awful to ski on. So Bomber Slalom Skis circa 2010 comes in at number 3. All right, now we're getting down to it. Coming in at number 2 is the Rossignol 9X race ski in both the slalom and the GS ski. This was right before Rossignol kind of hit it big when they had people like Lindsey Vonn, Julie Mancuso, Ted Rickety. A couple years after this ski came out, when they had the Radical series, that's when they really struck gold. They made a really beautiful ski. Everybody was on it. People were winning World Cup titles on it. They kind of had cornered the market on best skiers. People who were winning World Cup races were on Rossignol for a few years. But before that, boy, they had the biggest stinker of a ski I've ever seen. They must have had to go completely back to the drawing board when they designed it. The Rossignol 9X, which preceded the Radical, that ski was awful. What they tried to do is to cut down on weight. They were, at least, again, this is old information, so I apologize if I'm misquoting this, but what I believe they went back to do was they went back and took the wood out of the ski and replaced it with some kind of composite styrofoam to cut back on weight, and I think to make manufacturing cheaper, and it stunk. Talk about a dead, lifeless ski. It would max out pressure super early in the turn. It wouldn't kind of kick out into the rest of the turn. They broke super easily, so like they would just snap in half at ski races. I saw it delaminate like crazy. I never heard anyone on those Rossignol 9Xs talk good about them. And in fact, for years after, because I raced on the Rossignol Radical skis that came after, which was super popular, and anybody who owned a Rossignol 9X said, oh my god, how are you skiing on Rossignol's? Those skis stink. And you had to kind of talk them down and be like, no, they're good now, I swear. Man, Rossignol 9X, that was one of the worst race skis I'd ever seen. People really, really hated them. Maybe it wasn't so bad on the West Coast. I was racing on the East Coast, but everyone on the East Coast, they said you would just feel all of the chatter on a hard turn, especially in GS where you're loading it. And they said the slalom, the ski felt like it was dead. It wouldn't snap in and out of the turns. Anybody I knew that was stuck with Rossignol 9X race skis hated them. And in fact, what's funny is they had the Look pivot binding. The Look pivot binding got discontinued, and now the Look pivot bindings are really expensive and people buy them for a premium. So kind of funny how that all comes full circle. Later on, freeride skiers would go and look for these race skis and pull them off because they loved the Look pivot. And now you see them, it's like the most expensive binding that Look sells. It's crazy how it's kind of come full circle that way. But that's number 2, the Rossignol 9X race. All right, and finally coming in at number 1 for the worst ski design of all time is the Volant SuperKarve. This would have been around 2001, 2002. This ski stunk. It was a premium ski, so it was like sold for quite a lot more than the rest of the skis. In fact, I think Volant still might make skis. I think I saw they're owned by Atomic or something, but it's a premium ski. It was made of all metal. This was given to me as a race ski when I was 12 years old. It was the worst ski I've ever skied on. It was super heavy. Obviously it wasn't made for me. It was made for kind of old men, you know, and I was just a kid on it, but it was so heavy. It was impossible to turn. It felt like you might as well be on straight skis at the time, but it had a ton of issues. Not only would the metal have issues where it would delaminate on the tips, but also you had this big issue where the glue that they used to hold the ski's center onto the top sheet didn't hold. So if you put your skis down into the snow, the metal and the base of the ski would separate. They would basically splinter out, and I had to like get them re-glued several times. I wasn't able to I had to be careful setting my skis down. These skis were not only premium and expensive, but were a total nightmare. They didn't ski well, they weren't well designed. It just kind of seeded this distrust for me in some of these premium ski brands. I know Stokely's are nice, and I've had to kind of get over that, but the #1 worst ski I've ever owned, skied on, whatever, raced on, is the Volant SuperKarve. It was terribly designed. It was a nightmare to carry because it was so heavy with that solid metal. I really, really hated those skis. Now, again, I know I wasn't the intended audience, so I'm willing to take that with a grain of salt, but not only that, seeing how terribly they were designed, how they kind of fell apart, literally they fell apart at the seams, that's crazy. That was such a bad ski. I know this isn't like an official list, I know that there were skis that were literally like unsafe, but I'm just giving you my personal most hated skis. There you have it. As always, thank you so much for watching, I really appreciate it. If you like this kind of content, please feel free to like and subscribe, it helps my channel out a lot. But more than anything, thank you for watching, I really appreciate it. And as always, I'll see you in the next one. See ya.